Oh, okay, here we go. Hey everyone. So one of my students, Craig, who I was doing a lesson with him on looping, and he wanted me to recap some of the concepts we talked about. He typically asks me to do this, and I thought I would just do it live because I've been trying to experiment with doing that more. So here we go. These are a bunch of things that I talk about in a looping lesson. Right now, I'm hooked up to an RC2, which is just a one-channel looper. Though he just got a 300, and he's playing with like switching from a 30 to a 300, and you're trying to figure out what to do with like the new workflow. And he had a bunch of questions about looping techniques that we were using. And so what I was basically working him through was like the Indian system that that I apply to a lot of the stuff. Like the idea is you start with a song, some song you want to work on, and you take it through a bunch of processes. So we were working like slow dancing in a burning room, and you've got this riff. So if you take that riff right there as like the core of what you're doing, we're like looking at playing with that and figuring out how to expand on it. And the first thing I gave him is this idea: you start with the tempo-less thing. You have this tempo-less phase where you create a drone, and you just kind of find all the notes that you can play with. And the main thing I told him is even before you start the drone, you want to center yourself. You want to make this kind of a meditative way of practicing, partially because there's just so much going on in one of these performances that it's very easy to get lost. And partially because it sets the audience up as well for what you're going to do, to have like a pace where you can explore things and grow with them, but try to keep it sounding musical the whole time. So that's that. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to if anyone meditates at all, you like kind of start to switch yourself into that mode. And the main thing is like, if you've never done it before, you think of like just focusing on the present moment somehow. It's like what's going on in the room, how the guitar feels on your fingers, how your body feels, all these things. And just trying to center yourself, calm yourself, focusing on having the most stable emotional energy you can. And if you have a hard time with that, that's fine. This is a great way to practice it. So you get into that. If you don't feel like you get it perfectly, that's fine. You just take a second for that. And when you build your drone, you do the same thing. So I'm going to make just an open E drone. I'm going to make a power chord on the 7th fret of my A string and just drone that. And as I'm making this drone, it's tempo-less. I mean, you could have one with a pulse that's rhythmic if you want, but I try to avoid that if I can. So you've kind of made that a little bit, and you let it sort of drift into itself. And then that's always just going, making sort of this ambient wash for you. The next thing you're going to do is start to figure out what notes can I play. And I have, my kind of diatonic box system where I've got like, my 5 or so major scales that I play. And that lets me play over the whole neck. Wherever you are in terms of learning this stuff, what you want to do is just find your notes first. So if I know I'm kind of starting here, this is like a good route to start on the key of E. I'm just like going to start exploring really slowly with no expectations. You're just finding notes and really making lots of space. You take as much time as you need. And I'm looking at like the paths I'm taking, which notes I'm using. I mean, for me, I've been through a lot of this stuff before, so there are territories that I know. What I'm going to try to do is explore specific areas and find unique licks. If I just know there's this Dorian scale here, I'm going to play that Dorian scale box, but again, it's in the key of the song, which is the key of E. So I'm going to use those notes and try to figure out how do I like really get my hands into that area in a way that sounds unique. So here we go. If you hit wrong notes, it's a drone, so almost anything goes. So you just kind of play it off as if you meant it. So wrong notes are fine, but you want to kind of eventually find your way back to what you started. Yeah. So the first thing is like finding some area. I mean, I always have this challenge for myself. I want to try to play all the scale boxes in that key. you know, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not really super musical to do that usually. So what I try to do is like somehow deepen my understanding of the scale boxes with that in mind, of like trying to make it sound musical as you do it. Like just almost like exploring some area a couple strings at a time. So like finding the notes. Like that was pretty, but those weren't the notes I was looking for. There we go. And like it's okay to like play with wrong notes. But then eventually kind of get back to what you were going for originally, which is the major scale. And I can just keep expanding in that area. Until I've explored that whole area of the neck, like this whole way across. And then if I want to, I can keep going, or I can go on to the next phase. So the first phase you go through is this tempo, this phase where you kind of figure out what are the notes you're playing. The second phase has got a slow pulse to it. And you can express that however you want. The main thing I try to do in this phase is integrate chord tones. You know, in the real, I'm stop the drawing here for a second. In the hook to the John Mayer song, you have three chords. You have C sharp minor, A, and E, and that's all that's in the song. But it's like when you're really playing a solo, you want to be sensitive. You want to play within the chord tones, and it takes time to get used to where the chord tones are in the scales that you already explored. So what I like to do is like slowly build up rhythmic drones and keep changing them, because drones can also get kind of boring, or like it's certain things you just hear them a million times, you get sick of it. So what I try to do is set up a thing where I like create what I call a groove churn. You keep changing the things you're playing over. They're still rhythmic, but you also like make more chord changes more quickly. So I might start, my first churn might be just like a really slow like power chord on C sharp minor. It might be just like, ooh, let's delete that. Ooh, also watch out for deleting things. And here we go. So there's a little here that's loud. Let's see if I can turn that down a little bit. Yeah, that's blowing up. Much better. So you've got a little drone there, and now the only thing you got to worry about is the C sharp minor chord. But I'm still in this Dorian scale box, but it's colored by this. Oh man, it's still colored by the C sharp minor chord. So if I know these notes, but I want to figure out where are the notes for that. Like I'm kind of hearing this is a nice note, but it's a tense note. So I kind of get a sense of like, where are my chord tones in this area? I'm kind of noticing these are my chord tones, and these ones are not. And so I don't just know the notes, but I know what the landscape's like within them, and then I play with them. And I can do that through my whole box. It's just kind of like, I like to do chord tone solos for like a bit, like I outline just the chord. That's a fun game to think. It's just like, see if you can make just the chord tones interesting and then blend in other stuff. And then, okay, you've done that for a bit, but now you kind of want something different. What if I just change the same groove, but I want to add another chord? I'm going to make it long at first to give me lots of time to think about it. So right as I'm about to delete this, I haven't started recording yet. I'm just kind of grooving and holding on to it. Then I'm going to go record and A. So I got C sharp minor and A. if I wanted to, I would almost make those twice as long, like super duper long, tons of time on C sharp minor, tons of time on A. Now, I'm realizing this could go a little louder. Maybe louder. Okay, here we go. So now I'm in C sharp minor. And I got to try to hit that chord tone change. And these have almost all the same notes. They have the C sharp, the E, but the G, one chord's got the G sharp, one's got the A. So this is the only note I got to change, but I got to be sensitive to that everywhere on the Bach. That's the one note that changes. There you go. There it is again. So you can spend time like kind of screwing around with this. And like playing with the tension release on it around different numbers of chords. And eventually, if you want to keep it interesting, you just keep adding other techniques. What if I just started doing like a pluck and chuck groove over this? We'll listen for the end of it. 1, 2, 3. So I'm holding on to this groove while I'm deleting my loop and deciding what my next groove is going to be. See, I mean, I'm even screwing up the loop a couple times, but if I'm just like, I'm still playing, the glitches are kind of small, relatively speaking. So let's see if I get this. And I'll make a really long E. Now I've got this kind of slightly groovier. Cool. So I got lots of time in every chord, but it's a different thing, and I can explore more stuff. Okay, so I can do that as long as I want. Eventually, you want to get into something that really starts to tease at what you're going at. So this isn't the exact song I'm going to play, but it teases it. You can hear little traces of the shadows of the song. But still exploring sixths. If you're not really good at like sixth yet, you can just like go really slow. It really sounds good to just do this. Figure out what notes work in an area. You don't have to do a lot, but you can like get a landscape of darn near anything, whether you want it to be like intervals, like thirds or sixths, or scales, or like different types of licks. You can screw around with whatever you want, and it's like just organizing these things. It's just a matter of saying, okay, what do I want to work on today? Maybe make like a really quick list in a minute of like things you want to work on in different sections of this whole thing, and then dump them out. So eventually, you're gonna get to the point where you're like pretty close. Okay, I think I'm ready to kind of do my tune, and you're gonna catch the end. 1, 2, 3. Kind of do a nice nice ending, and you actually play your thing. You can sing the song or just like play the lick from it, whatever. But now everyone's like, oh yeah, that's what he was doing the whole time. It's kind of a neat moment. So once you get into that, I mean, you can kind of play with whatever you want on top of that. But if I'm kind of like, I'll actually put just a rhythm loop in. And if I want to, I think at this point I might just stack a percussive loop. Small, a little annoying, but it'll do. Etc. And then at some point, okay, you're like, okay, cook the whole chicken. I'm gonna take it away from the loop. An elegant ending. So the whole thing, in a nutshell, is that you've got a couple things you want to work on, and you can build them through these phases based on any song. You start with the idea of some song you want to do. In this case, we did Slow Dancing in the Burning Room. You're like, okay, what key am I in? You make a drone for that key. Tempo-less drone. You kind of try to put yourself in a calm, centered, meditative state of mind, and you slowly start to explore everything around the song you want to explore. My favorite thing to explore is just scales. Like, where are the notes? Explore them on as much of the neck as you can, but also when you're like, okay, yeah, this is getting a little hard. I'm starting to lose my focus. It's starting to be a little less musical. Try to bring it to a graceful ending and go to the next thing. Because every time you explore it, you're going to go deeper. So you don't have to reach any particular goal of like hitting every note on the neck every time you play. You want to do something juicy in the spaces you're in. And the next time you do it, do something else that takes you even further. But if you do that phase, you kind of get to know where the notes are. Then you start to add rhythm to it. You start to add different types of grooves, and you start from chords that might be like really long, like 16 beats long, like 4/8 measures long, super long. Maybe just one chord. Then maybe make like two chords that are like 16 measures long, super duper long. So you have a ton of time to integrate like chord tones, like knowing which notes go with each chord in which parts of the scale, and you're sensitive to that as you play. If you have long chord tones, you can sense that. Then you start to slowly compress those. So you do this, what I call a groove churn. You start with things that are simple and don't have a lot going on in them, and eventually you get to like more complicated things where the chord changes move faster and blah blah blah, and you keep changing these, partially because the loops get boring, and if you don't change them you just get listener fatigue, but also because you always want to be like pushing yourself. When you're like, okay, I kind of get where the notes are around here and I kind of get how to play around the chords, now you want to make it even harder. You want to keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and when you feel like, okay, I've kind of got my chord tones and stuff down, then you go into the phase of like you play the composition, you play the actual song. And if you want to make some loops around that and sort of screw around with it however you like. And at that point, you started from this meditative state of like very focused, very disciplined, trying to get better at something. And by the time you get to the song, you're just playing a song, but you've built up all this stuff within it, which is super cool. So yeah, that's my recap of my looping lesson with Craig. And yeah, I hope Craig finds this useful. I hope other people find it useful. And yeah, I'm going to sign off and call it a day. Thanks for hanging with me. And yeah, auf Wiedersehen, folks. Yeah.